3,000 years. That's a lot of history. We're about to dive into the epic story of Spain. It's a massive topic, so you might be wondering, where do we even begin?
It's a real puzzle, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about a story that stretches all the way from Roman legions marching on dusty roads to a globe-spanning empire, and then all the way to a modern democratic powerhouse. How do you possibly tell that story in just a few minutes?
Well, you look for a pattern, a rhythm. And for Spain, that rhythm is this constant, incredible cycle of rise, fall, and then somehow rising again. That's the story we're going to follow.
So every great story has a beginning, right? For Spain, the foundation isn't just one single layer, but a bunch of them, each one building on the last. Let's start with the Roman blueprint.
You know, when the Romans showed up, they didn't just conquer the land they called Hispania, they basically installed its first operating system. They built the roads and the cities, they set up a common legal code, and maybe most importantly, they brought the Latin language, which is the very DNA of the Spanish you hear today.
But no empire lasts forever. As Rome started to crumble, the Visigoths saw their chance and stepped in, setting up a Christian kingdom from their capital in Toledo. They ended up being this crucial bridge, connecting that old Roman world to the absolutely dramatic transformation that was about to sweep in from the south.
And wow, what a transformation it was! In the year 711, the Islamic conquest kicks off, and it ushers in the era of Al-Andalus. Now, this wasn't just a change of rulers, it was a full-blown renaissance. Cities like Cordoba became these shining beacons of learning, pumping out huge advances in science and philosophy and giving the world architectural wonders like the Alhambra that, let's be honest, still take your breath away.
771 years. Just think about that number for a second. For nearly 8 centuries, while Al-Andalus was flourishing in the south, a slow, determined pushback was building from the Christian kingdoms up in the north. This was the long struggle we now call the Reconquista.
We call this period the Reconquista, and it all started with a small victory at Covadonga, but it gained massive momentum at the Battle of Las Navas Tolosa, and then finally it all came to a head in 1492 with the fall of Granada, the very last Muslim stronghold. That single year, 1492, it changed absolutely everything.
And with the peninsula finally united under one crown, Spain was just poised to explode onto the world stage. This marks the beginning of its first truly epic rise, the Age of Empire.
But here's the thing about empire. It's always a double-edged sword. On one side, you had unimaginable glory, staggering wealth flowing in from the Americas, and a cultural golden age that gave us geniuses like El Greco and Cervantes. But the other side of that coin held the immense cost. Constant, draining wars, and an economic strain that would eventually plant the seeds of its own decline.
And that brings us to the fall part of our story. This was the long, slow crisis that would stretch across centuries and finally explode in the turmoil of the 20th century.
This decline wasn't some sudden crash. It was more like a slow bleed. Over the 18th and 19th centuries, the empire crumbled piece by piece as its American colonies fought for and won their independence. Back home, Spain was being torn apart by internal conflicts and just total economic chaos. The Golden Age was definitely over.
All of this instability eventually erupted into the Spanish Civil War. It was a brutal, tragic conflict between two totally opposing visions for Spain, the Republicans and the Nationalists, and ended with a victory for the Nationalists led by General Francisco Franco.
This victory plunged Spain into nearly 4 decades of authoritarian rule. The Franco era meant a dictatorship, a period of harsh political repression, and let's say a complex strategic position during the Cold War that kept Spain pretty isolated from the rest of Europe.
But, as we've seen, every fall in Spain's story seems to be followed by a rise. And after 1975, Spain began one of its most remarkable rebirths yet. And this wasn't a slow, gradual change. This was a deliberate, total reinvention. Spain transitioned peacefully to democracy. It established a constitutional monarchy, and it decisively turned its face towards Europe, joining what would eventually become the European Union. It was a complete transformation of its political identity.
And that political rebirth fueled a cultural and economic one, too. Spain became a tourism superpower and a really key player in the EU. And of course, you absolutely cannot talk about modern Spain without talking about football.
The dominance of clubs like Real Madrid and Barcelona, and the national team's unbelievable run winning the Euros twice and the World Cup, it became a global symbol of this new, vibrant, confident Spain.
So, from a Roman province to a global empire, through crisis and then rebirth, the one constant in Spanish history is change. It's a nation that has reinvented itself time and time again. Which of course leaves us with a big question for the future. What comes next?